And we are live now. Well, this is really cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our Friday live stream. It's good to see you out there. Welcome, Angela. How you doing over there?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing really good. And something that's really kind of interesting is we are now doing this live stream not only on YouTube and Facebook, but we also do it on Twitch. And and I never really quite knew how that worked. Hey, Trudy and Anchor and Christine. I never really knew how that worked, but I've got the Twitch thing up, and we are indeed live and streaming on Twitch. But no one over there. Oh, we do even have one person on Twitch watching us. Hey, welcome,
Sweet.
welcome over there on Twitch. Good to see you. So anyway, welcome. Trudy and Anchor and everyone out there, thanks for being here. So today we're going to have a Q&A episode. I have a list of questions for Angela, and miraculously, the list totals to 12. So they get it up. And Angela may have some questions for me, and you guys can call or type your questions in, whatever you might like to do. And we may as well just get right into it. Are you ready, Angela?
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay. Well, here we go. I think I'll start with my list here for you. This first question, we may have talked about this before, Angela, but the question is, what is the most profound change that you have noticed about yourself or your view of recovery since COVID?
I think I may have to pull the audience. No, let's see. The biggest change that I've known seen in myself regarding recovery since COVID. I suppose it's probably about the need for meetings and being in person. That I before was very much a show up to at least my home group each week, and meeting in person for either sponsoring or that kind of stuff. But I think I was much more into that was a very necessary part of my recovery. And now I would like it to be, because I'd like things to be in a place where we could do that as a world, just because, it is difficult not having as much social interaction, just as a human being. But as far as recovery, I feel like my recovery improved in COVID because additional resources became available to me that either I wasn't aware of or I wasn't taking advantage of. Like I had attended some of the online Zoom meetings prior to the pandemic, but it wasn't a major thing. It was just kind of an aside, and they didn't seem, they just weren't like the regular meetings. So I think I've changed in the way that I view in-person meetings, and then also just the way I continue to be in recovery. That 12-step or AA isn't, my only thing. It's never been my only thing for, personal recovery, but as far as even substance use and such, that there's just so much more out there. And then of course, service, that I'm in service in different ways than I was previously. Some of the same ways, but just there's more variety that I'm able to do now, more things that I've learned, and more interests that I have. So, yeah. How about you?
Pretty much, pretty similar. I think. It's kind of strange for me in a certain way, but yeah, I guess I've come to the point where, like you, I feel that AA is like one part of what I do to be in recovery.
Hmm.
It is not my identity as a person in recovery. It's not how I see myself, as just an AA person.
Hmm.
But I'm more interested in recovery at large and the in the world and different things like that. And
Yeah.
that has been probably a result of you know not spending time in in-person meetings and meeting people online that are in recovery but involved in different things as part of their recovery.
Right.
So I'm still like in the recovery community and
Hmm.
working with people and talking with people in recovery, but not necessarily in the format of an AA meeting.
Right. Yeah. And I think my interests are, I mentioned early on that I was thinking of doing a website or some sort of thing. Last year I think I mentioned it and was thinking of calling it like, ungodly sobriety or
Right.
something.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm like, no, it should be ungodly recovery. And then I'm like, no, ungodly wellness. And so it just kind of, shows. And then now I'm like, I'm not even going to use the word ungodly.
You're right.
But that, yeah, my view was much more on like, sobriety, and that while I thought, um, harm reduction and stuff was an okay thing. It was still, that my view was on sobriety because that's what I knew and that's what had worked for me. And then, I wasn't sure about the other stuff. And then now, I'm much more into just wellness and all the varieties of it, and trying to understand, the different things that are working, for different people, and keeping an eye on the psilocybin research and the ketamine research, and all the different things that are happening to be of service to people that are struggling either with substances or mental health in general, because we can all feel that it's tough in the world right now. One
Hmm.
day they're feeling okay, and the next day there's like some other news bite, and you're like, okay, great, what is this? And so trying to research and understand all the different resources that are out there has become much more important to me in a way that it was more of a hobby previously,
Hmm.
and then now it just feels like more of a mission, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, that's really interesting. And other people that are posting comments are posting pretty much similar experiences that they feel like their recovery is actually improved and broadened
Hmm.
because of this. And a lot of people are, you know, uh, experiencing their recovery in a different way, and it's not necessarily a negative thing at all. And in fact, it's a very
Right.
positive thing. I can
Yeah.
certainly think of different things that I have learned, over this last couple of years that I might not have been
Hmm.
exposed to otherwise. So that is really
Yeah.
interesting. Hey, Christine.
Yeah, I agree with Christine too that there are many pros and cons to virtual Zoom communications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of the pros are that if you are running the meeting, you can kick people out.
Right. You can't
I
kick people
couldn't
out
really
regularly.
do that in the real meetings. It usually caused a problem if you tried to. Um,
Yeah.
and you can mute people,
Yeah.
which would have been nice in traditional meetings sometimes too. But and I just like that there are people from all over the place that attend our meetings now. I think the diversity of people and of thought and of you know ways in sobriety is so refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So I'm gonna move on to the next question then. And this question actually kind of goes with the first question. and you've kind of touched on it when you, in your
Mhm.
answer to the first question, but I'll just go ahead with it anyway. Do you place as much importance on working the 12 steps today as compared to your early years in recovery? Why are they still important, or why are they less important to you now?
Mhm. Yeah, so to me personally, they were important in the beginning because I didn't have a lot of options. And so I wanted to not drink because of the consequences of what happened when I drank. Not because I didn't enjoy, drinking. Although I never liked alcohol,
Hmm.
I just enjoyed the way that it made me feel, or not feel after a while. But the consequences were too becoming too dire. So yeah, I just wanted to stop that. But I didn't have money for rehab, and I couldn't afford expensive therapy, and AA was the only gig in town. So,
Hmm.
so that's and in order to be part of the community and try to get better, that was the suggestion, was to work the 12 steps. So fortunately, I found somebody who would work with me with the kind of book that I wanted to work with,
Hmm.
and then she added some of her own stuff, and so it was very important because it really did help me to understand what role alcohol was playing in my life, and what role I wanted it to play, and that I couldn't have it play a role in my life anymore if I wanted a better life. And then it helped me to understand my resentments, what was going on, why I had them, how long I'd been holding on some of them, what things were mine, what things weren't, and helped me to get some reality on things that I was still mad about, with family or friends, or whatever. And so yeah, so they were essential in helping me get a different perspective on my own life and my own experiences and my own history. And then start learning to do things in a different way, particularly with honesty, and interacting with people and relationships, mainly friendships, but relationships in general. Learning to give the benefit of the doubt when somebody said something that hurt me, or did something that I thought was hurtful towards me, trying to start with, maybe there was some confusion, rather than that they're a jerk and they hate me, or they don't care about me, or whatever. So that it improved my life tremendously. And then it also gave me a way to be helpful to others, and so that gave me a sense of purpose for a while, to be of service to people. And then that sense of purpose has continued to develop in other ways. So it was very important to me. Now. I'm not one of those people who think about, every single day what step I've used,
Right.
or
Right.
or how it relates. When I get into situations where I'm circling, or I don't like my own behavior, or I've stepped on somebody's toes and they let me know it, then I know how to use these tools. So they do come in handy, particularly, when I'm circling about something. I still do find writing things out in a fourth step resentment type of a way helpful, because it gets it, one, out of my head and on paper. So I don't have to keep circling on it, because I know where it's at. I'm not going to forget. And then it also lets me go through and think of it in a much more structured way, instead of just circling on what my own thoughts were, and then what that person said, and what I should say. And next time I see them, they're going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and then, whatever. It actually, uh, shrinks all of that down onto a piece of paper, and then helps me understand why am I really upset about this? Because it's usually not whatever's circling in my head. It's some core feeling that got hurt, something that triggered me that I'm usually not, super conscious of. And if it is something I'm conscious of, it also helps me to figure out where I have control over the situation? Is it something that I need to set a boundary on? Is it something that that the other person just wasn't aware of, and I, either need to talk to them about it or just let it go because, it wasn't an intentional harm, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, so I can still use various tools if I'm just in a really bad way as well, just chronically, not doing well for more than a couple of days. I might go to a 10th step idea of, looking at, okay, writing things down, what went well today and, what didn't, and what might I do differently tomorrow, or set an intention list of how I would like each day to go, and look at that in the morning and start going down that way. So yeah, so I find that I can use the stuff that I learned. I just don't, talk in the way I hear some people of, in more of a traditional, meeting setting of how they're using the steps every single day of their life, or, how important they are in that aspect. I mean, they're things that have changed me. And so it's part of who I am now, but I just don't think of them in that sort of way. And when people ask me if, they should do the steps, I do suggest that depending on what their resources are, that they are helpful for those who are of limited resources, and that they find somebody that, that they can trust to work with them on it, or to do it in small groups. I know some people who've done that, some women who have done small groups and gone through like Jeffrey Munn's book together, and they found that helpful because, it wasn't just a one-on-one, which can sometimes feel like a hierarchical situation, or a one up, one down type of a thing. Or, they can take it if somebody has resources like counseling, or, rehab or whatever, they can take one of the secular books in and kind of work on some of this stuff with the resources that they have there, whether it's a peer support or a counselor or whatever.
Boy, we are right in sync with each other. What you just described is exactly how I feel about the steps now, and I've gone through a similar evolution. I couldn't put it any better than you just did. And like Joe said, they're good, they're okay. I'm just not as obsessed with them as I once was. I don't speak in the language of the 12 steps. I don't have to put a step number on something. And in some way, I try to just avoid it altogether. So they'll always be a part of me because what I learned in AA has been extremely helpful to me, and it's really been a building block upon which I've been building my life. So, but I don't want to limit myself to just those things, And I don't want
Right.
to. I don't want. I'm not at a point in my life where I'm that comfortable speaking in that language. I just I don't know. I just have kind of moved in a different way, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not knocking them. They
Mm-hmm.
were certainly helpful to me, but I also recognize that they might not be helpful to everybody, and they have some potential to be not helpful for some people, if depending on how you um, are approaching them, or someone else is dealing with you with them. So, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, and other people have similar comments out there. Let's see. Christine says on the flip side, she's talking about the online meetings. Um, and then Bree says exactly, John, the only step I consciously think about is that first step. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with the online meetings, one thing that I did find during when I was doing much more of a lockdown stage of the pandemic, was that, yeah, sometimes I did have lunch with people via Zoom, that we'd both,
Mm,
grab our lunch and we'd hang out and we'd eat lunch and we'd chat, and that worked out okay. So it was more of, just to keep in touch with people that I cared about at times that were, easier for whoever. And so, yeah, so, you can still go to lunch or go out to breakfast. it's just a little weird, and because the person's on the screen instead of right there. But on the plus side, if they like to order stuff that you find smells bad, then you don't have to smell it. So that kind of works out. And I saved a lot on clothing and makeup and stuff over the last year.
Yeah.
So all bonuses.
That's true. Okay. Question number 3. And you might be bored with this question by now, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Do you think this is kind of like a Facebook post type of question? Do you think AA will learn to adapt to changing times and survive through the end of this century? Why or why not? And I probably should add, should it?
Yeah.
Should it?
Okay. I don't know. That's almost like asking if I think democracy will last.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the same category. Yeah, I think that it likely will continue. I think it'll just be in a different capacity than where it was before the pandemic started. I think that there were changes already happening. They were very slow, but as with technology and climate change, they're just moving really fast now, and so I don't know that it'll look the same as as maybe somebody who I don't know was in a went into a coma in 1985 and a member of AA, and then popped out in another 7 years or something. I don't know if they'd recognize it as being the same, but I think that it will mostly remain. I just don't think that it'll look like people think, which is probably somewhat similar. I mean, it'll be much more dramatic, but like people who got sober in the early 80s and late 70s and stuff, AA in the 2000s looked a lot different than it did back then. My understanding at least is that back then there wasn't a lot of big book idolization or idolizing the founders. I mean, they were talked about and stuff and appreciated, but it was just more about going to meetings and talking about getting sober and staying sober and trying to become a better person. There wasn't as much of the cultish, cliquish aspect of things, and it wasn't fundamentalist as a lot of it is now. So I think it will go on. There's a possibility that it might not, but I think that it'll still continue. I think it'll just, there'll just be different meetings, and they'll probably be, divided of, no, this is real AA, and no, we're real AA. And, that kind of stuff will continue to go on for a bit. And then it'll figure itself out. But, whatever can't go on forever won't. And so it'll change in some way. But I think that the idea of community and of people with similar either issues or struggles or whatever coming together to help each other will continue, and so that aspect will be there, and I think it'll still most likely be called AA, and still have some of the principles that it always has. I think it'll look a little bit different. So.
Yeah. I definitely think that the online component is just going to grow and blossom. I think that the culture of AA is going to change just from bottom up. And I think that AA will survive, but it'll be different than what it is now. Whereas now it's almost like structured like a country, with territories and groups,
Yeah.
city, all this kind of stuff. And it's not going to be like that anymore. It's not. It's not constrained by physical boundaries. And furthermore, what I'm finding, Angela, I've actually been attending some quote traditional AA meetings online, and I've been
Mhm.
okay and comfortable with them. They
Mhm.
haven't been bothering me at all. And what I find interesting is some of the younger people, and I mean younger in sobriety, newer to the program, I guess, they talk about thumpers, big book thumpers, just the way
Mhm.
that you might hear a secular person talk about them, and they
Mhm.
and they and they say, these big book thumpers are scaring away the newcomers, is what they're worried about.
Mhm.
And I think, well, that's I'm thinking to myself, well, this is really promising, and this is a traditional meeting where they're talking about
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I do think that things are going to change, just because of how people are relating to one another, and it's just inevitable that's going to change.
Mhm.
But I think the strength of AA, the reason it's going to live, is because AA is basically what you define it to be and what your little group defines it to be.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I don't know if it will always. I don't see it always being a
Mhm.
society that
Yeah.
it gathers around a book.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think that for a while it really has been. I think that people who get active in general service and stuff can see like how everything comes together and how the machine works and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I know from even the beginning when people would go out of town or they'd move to Boise from someplace else, they'd come to a couple meetings and they'd be like, "You guys just don't do AA right here," or if you go someplace else and they're doing it a certain way, you're like, "Why do they do it that way? That's just not right." So in Boise, somebody might come in and have visited someplace in New York and been like, they don't talk about solution there. There was no solution. It was just people, talking about their drunkalogs and all their problems and stuff. And somebody from New York would come to Boise and be like, they just talk about the book. I could read the book at home if I wanted to. Why are they talking about the stupid book? I need to talk about, not drinking
Hmm.
today. And yeah, and so I think there's been a little bit of that,
Yeah.
for a while, but I think it'll just be more pronounced. And yeah, I don't see it as a bad thing. I think
No.
a lot of things will mix together, and yeah, and I'm cool with all of it.
Okay. Here's question number 4.
Okay.
As you look back on your first year or two of sobriety, are those good memories now, or do you remember those years as hard times? What do you think shapes your memory?
Hmm. Yeah. So, I think that memories change, and that there's a lot of good therapies to help that as well. So um my first 2 years were difficult. I didn't ever do the pink cloud thing. I wouldn't have called any part of that a pink cloud. My first year was, just, AA meetings, constantly, 3 a day, every single day, different meetings, all over town, wherever I could get to. I did prioritize those with good snacks. And, and yeah, and just trying to, listen for similarities. I did argue, quite a bit after a while. It took me a little bit to, feel like I had enough knowledge or enough meetings under my belt to argue with people. But yeah, it wasn't easy. I had, different living situations that I was trying to figure out. Moving out of, places where people drank, moving jobs. I went through I don't know how many jobs in my first few years. Um, and so starting to learn that that maybe it wasn't all of these employers' issues. Maybe it had something to do with me and my attitude about employment. Um, so yeah, so had some of that going on. A lot of financial insecurity. Just yeah, figuring myself out and trying. not to drink, and trying to make friends that didn't, or that were cool with me not. Most of my friends at the time said they were okay, but stuff would come out every once in a while, or little snide comments, or I'd stop getting invited to stuff. And so, yeah, so learning to figure out who I was in sobriety has been a long journey. But yeah, the first 2 years were not easy. They probably weren't as hard as somebody else's maybe, but they weren't easy for me. The going through the steps. Yeah, having to make some amends that were difficult, having to admit, some of the behaviors that I engaged in that didn't go with the image I had of myself of being, a good person. All of that. It was tough.
Yeah. It's interesting for me because, like you, those were some of the most difficult times of my life. I was struggling financially. Staying sober wasn't easy. My life was pretty much AA meetings, and everything was a struggle. Everything was a struggle. Um, but I also had, looking back on it, I have good memories of the people that I connected with early on. And I was thinking about this week. I lost a friend this week. He
Mm,
died.
I'm sorry.
And yeah, he was a very important person to me, like during the first 10 years of my sobriety. He and his sister and I used to run around together, do everything together. And I don't know, it was very special friendship. And so I have really good memories about that period of time, those first couple of years when we were both newly sober and getting our shit together,
Hmm.
and the laughs that we would have during those hard times. But so there's kind of mixed memories, you know. On one hand, they were really hard and painful times, but on the other hand, some of the people that I think back on fondly. Some do have some fond memories of that time. So it's weird, and I think you said something about how memories can be tricky, can't they? I mean, as
Hmm.
time moves on, we do look at things from a different perspective and a different feeling in a different way. And I guess also, if like when my friend died, it caused me to kind of think back on him and my relationship with him and those times too. So it kind of colors your memory a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you, those first 2 years were not. I had no pink cloud either. It was not good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that was a interesting question. So number 5 is I think this is one that you've talked about many times, and it's part of your story, really. But Beth H
Hmm.
wrote a book that's coming out this month titled We're Not All Egomaniacs: Adapting the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous for Alcoholics with Low Self-Esteem.
Hmm.
In the book, Beth describes two basic personality types: those who tend to have a more narcissistic, egomaniac type personality, and those who are more shame based, who have more like a low self esteem issue. And
Hmm.
the thesis in her book is that the big book and
Hmm.
the AA program was geared more towards the narcissistic personality type. And I know that
Hmm.
you agree with her, but I wonder if you could share your thoughts on that subject.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree in that, we know who the people were that started AA, and that they were, trying to do some work on bringing them down a little bit, ego deconstruction, and right size them, as I think the big book says, or is said in meetings. Ego deflation. because these were people who were usually, when they weren't, completely drunk, stockbrokers and doctors and lawyers and people of high status, and they were men, so it was written, and the steps that they kind of put down there that are suggestions, were made to help these guys get some reality in their life, that if they were these super great individuals, then why were they rolling in alley drunks, and so that's what it's geared for. So I agree. I don't know that there's like just two. Of course, there's a
Yeah.
spectrum of different
Yeah.
people, because some of us can be, as another phrase I've often heard, egomaniacs, with an inferiority
Yeah.
complex and stuff, and and that's definitely something that I can relate to, because like, even as I was like writing out the my inventory, I thought that I would have more personal defects than everyone else, and and better, and that I'd be like the best at being the worst, and that's simply not true, and there's part of me that knew it, or at certain meetings, that I go into a meeting thinking that these people are really not the kind of people that that I would hang out with, and part of that was being a hipster at the same time, I guess, but just to having a little bit of superiority. Also, with being secular, going into these meetings as an atheist, there was part of me that felt superior to somebody who was, totally giving everything, saying they gave everything to God, and then didn't worry about it and stuff, that I thought was silly and below me. So yeah, so I had some of the ego stuff, but a lot of it came out of shame and trauma, and early childhood issues and stuff. And so yeah, so I don't know that I think that that yeah, it's like two different things, because I think even the narcissists are the most shame-based people.
Interesting.
They're just not aware that that's what's happening with them. And so yeah, so I agree, though, that that I think that I don't know if she says this, but I think that the big book should be considered a historical document, and referenced as such, and that that new writings, like we have in a lot of the secular community, but also just within AA itself, should be framing some things in a more universal way that's accessible to people of color, and gender differences, and things like that, so that they can have access to the same kind of sobriety that most of us have been working towards. So yeah, I don't know if that really
Oh,
answered the
did a good
question,
job.
but
Yeah. I
yeah.
found it really interesting when I was talking with her, and she described it the same way, that, people exist on a spectrum. You can have both, mixture of things, but um, I found it really interesting that she was talking about how the narcissist just found a different way, a different way of coping,
Mm,
with
yeah.
their with things. So a different
Hmm.
coping mechanism. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question for you. This is question number 6. Um, what does it mean to leave AA as opposed to simply deciding not to attend AA meetings? If one stops attending AA meetings, have they left AA? If they go to a meeting, have they come back?
Wow. Yeah,
Is
are
that
you
a weird
feeling
question?
existential, or what?
Well, I talk to people every once in a while who say they're leaving AA or they left AA. And what does
Uh-huh.
that really mean? They just stop going to meetings? Because what if I don't go to meetings for a while? Have I left? And if I start going again, have I come back?
Yeah. Well, I think it probably goes along the same same thing as, if you're an AA member, what makes you an AA member? We don't have cards. We don't, sign a manifesto. We don't, yeah. And so, yeah, so I think if somebody says that they're leaving AA, then it just means that they, don't feel like they're part of the AA community,
Right.
or that they don't, they don't go to meetings. But yeah, I do know people who have not attended meetings for years, but they still, hang out with people in the AA community, and that's still their main social outlet is people within that community. So they still do like book clubs, or knitting circles, or whatever, and they still, I guess, say they're part of AA. They just don't go to meetings anymore. So yeah, I think it just depends on the person of, and why they want, to, feel the need to announce it.
Right. I think that's the difference is that you can just stop going to meetings, right?
Yeah,
And it's not
yeah,
a big deal.
right, yeah,
Or
and
you can leave and make the announcement that you're leaving,
yes,
and
yeah,
there's a
kind of like
purpose
when
behind.
you get mad at Facebook and you're like, I'm leaving
Exactly.
Facebook,
Exactly.
and
Exactly. You can either
so
leave Facebook or you can just stop going going to
right, yeah,
Facebook.
or you just, deactivate your Facebook.
Right.
But I don't know, it could also be, if somebody feels that, that they do have stuff to share and are part of like a larger recovery community.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
might say that, that I left AA and this is what I continued to do to stay sober, or, that, I didn't feel like I had to do anything else. I just stayed sober, or, whatever. So yeah, it's just kind of like, anybody who wants to say that they're in AA can, even if they've never been to a meeting before,
That's true.
because, it's like nobody's going to be like, wait a minute, which meeting did you go to?
Right.
How many times did you go to the meeting? Because there's no set limit, like you have to attend at least 3 meetings in 3 months before you're considered. No, it just doesn't work like that. So yeah, so if people want to leave AA, a lot of people have, and it worked out for some of them, and it worked out, it didn't for some, and yeah,
I just ask
I
if they leave, that they really leave. Because
yeah,
a lot
it's
of
like,
people.
yeah, well, I guess, I left a year and a half ago, because I haven't attended an in-person meeting since then. So, does that mean that I've left AA? I do Zoom meetings, but, yeah, I don't know.
Well, this
So,
next question is pretty similar, and this
okay.
probably just shows you where my state of mind is. But lately,
Yeah, it
I
sounds
didn't
like
weird.
you're leaving AA. Yeah.
No, but I've been thinking weird things about it. Anyway, lately I've been finding it weird that those of us who attend AA meetings refer to ourselves as members, that we have a membership in AA. I don't remember signing up for membership. Is there a place to cancel? Nobody in Smart Recovery is a member of Smart. They just attend Smart meetings.
Yeah.
Do you see a distinction? And do you think it's better to be a member of something rather than just a participant?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that the whole membership thing comes from some of the language in the literature. And so, that's part of what makes us members of AA, members of meetings or members of groups. And that I do think that there's advantages to being a member, because membership has a, it invokes community, being part of, and more of a kinship, I guess, with other people, rather than a participant. Feels more like a one-off, that I was a participant of a survey, on something, or I participated in a after school program, or something like that. Participation just means that you were kind of at some place and did something, whereas the membership is more of shows a kinship or a commitment. And so I think that there are pros and cons for for both, depending on what it is. And and that it could be more or less helpful depending on what you're talking about. So I think as far as AA, talking about it, being a member does have the feeling of community, of being part of something, and has an aspect of belonging, and I do think that humans need that, and I think that's one area where church was really good for people, and really helpful for people, particularly people at certain developmental levels where it's difficult for them to be able to splice a lot of large words or certain information. It gave them a way to be a part of a community and to have values, to be able to get along in their community. And so I think some of the difficulties we have now is because of the losing our religion, but the church community, the downside is the dogma, so I think that part of what AA has given people is a place where they can belong. Unfortunately, it has introduced dogma as well, but on the other hand, it's structured in such a way that people can either create different dogma or try to ditch the dogma and keep community as the core of it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the concept of belonging to something that's bigger than myself, that's more important to myself, that has a history and has a future, and I can participate and contribute to it, does give me some sense of meaning and purpose. And so in that sense, it was good and helpful. And I think that AA does a really great job because of the way that meetings are structured bottom up and groups are autonomous, that we do a really great job of just building a sense of community and closeness. And so in that sense, you feel like you're part of. And so, yeah, I can see where that's beneficial. I sometimes just think it's weird though, because it's like, I could be a member of a church, or a member of AA, but I can't be a member of like Smart Recovery or something like that. Anyway, it's just it's all semantics, but it's something that I thought I was thinking about. I just guess I have a lot of time on my hands, but I've been thinking about stuff like that. Joe Bob thinks it's interesting though. He says, this is interesting. Whatever. He said, this is an interesting definition, description of religion and church attendance and attendees. Well, thank you, Joe Bob. I think it is. Anyway, I don't know. Okay, this next question is a bizarre one too. But I actually had a conversation with this guy. His name is Bo, and he created an app called Sober Grid, and it's a geo-social media app for people in recovery. And so they can go in there, they can create groups, they can message one another and provide support for one another. And for a fee, they can access recovery coaches. So anyway, while I was talking to him, he told me that they're now developing on an artificial intelligence feature in the app that will be able to detect whether a person is prone to a relapse based upon what they've been posting in the app. And that the idea being that they can reach out to that person and help them before they actually relapse. Now, when he told me about this, my reaction was, that's scary. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I don't know that, I don't find a lot of technology that scary because I have different views on, what reality might be. So,
I'm talk to you about
so
that
yeah,
one of these days.
yeah,
You mentioned that
yeah. So yeah. But I think some of that already exists. We're just not, aware of it. And and it's usually a little bit more subtle. And and so I think that if people are aware that's a possibility, then, I think it can be a good thing, because there are, ways that we as humans can fail each other in recognizing, different signals, and stuff, and avoiding relapse, kind of like harm reduction. It's keeping somebody alive, long enough to get recovery. So if it's an AI that can tell that, then great. I think people would just have a problem if they didn't know that was part of what was happening. And I think people just have a great fear of AI, which I don't that much,
Mm.
because again, the way that I view the world, and just the last few years, um, has changed quite a bit. And
Okay.
so I think that AI will be more active in our lives in ways that is going to be helpful,
Mhm.
and that can probably be more helpful than the way that we do things now. Like, I think AI will be helpful in governance, and
Mm.
making decisions of how societies should govern, and that they can do it in a way that's much better than how we do it now. But there's a lot of people that are a little bit more concerned about that, and yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. So
Very
no,
interesting.
I'm not concerned about it, and I think that people who get the app and find it helpful, I'd love to hear about it, and see what they find helpful about it, because yeah, we are going to need more ways to connect with each other, because particularly with the Delta variant, we're not doing too well with that, and
Mhm.
who knows what will come after that. And we've
Mhm.
kind of ticked off the Earth, so there's going to be climate
Mhm.
refugees and all sorts of things happening. So yeah, so figuring out ways to be a part of something, of feeling like you're in community with other people in some way, whether it's in a recovery community, or whether it's a hobby, or something along those lines. I think we're going to need that, because we're not going to be living in the way that we've been used to for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting, Angela. Yeah, I found it kind of fascinating when he was talking about it, but it did kind of, I don't know, I found it somewhat disturbing too. It's like, because you're sitting there posting, on this app, and you're connecting with people, and you feel
Hmm.
like this sense of connection with these people, but obviously nothing that you do that's on the internet is actually really private. So
Hmm.
you've got, at this time that you're doing the socializing and connecting with people as part of your recovery, some app is picking up on
Hmm.
on what you're doing, and alerting you when you're in trouble before you even know you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah, but you see, it's not very much different than what Facebook and some of these other things are doing
yeah,
now. Whereas
right.
they know enough of your language and your interests and your moods and stuff like that. That when you're having a downtime, or you use a certain amount of certain words in a certain way, they'll show you ads that will make you much more likely to buy something that you may not have been
Mhm,
interested in buying a week and a half ago.
mhm.
But they know that your mood is such that you'll seek out,
Wow.
some sort of a distraction, or some sort of a food, or some, whatever it is. And so then they gear that. Also, if you're away from it for a while, or not engaging, they'll post a memory picture of you with somebody that you really care about, to get you to click on it, and then maybe click on that person's page and see what they're up to, and things like that. And so the algorithms are already um, changing the way that we think, and the way that we do things. Most people just aren't aware of that. They still think that they're making their own decisions out of their own free will and thought, and aren't aware that yeah, that for a while their minds have been changing
Mhm.
because of algorithms and social media.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
so yeah, so
Wow.
if it can do it in a positive way, then I
Yeah,
say
if
all
you can do it
for
in a
it.
positive way, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting stuff there. Anyway, so this question is kind of an easy one, I think. What do you like? What do you like about picking berries? Do you just like berries?
That's the funny
There's
thing
more
is
to it
that,
than that.
yeah, that I don't, oh, there's more to the question, or
No,
that's the
I
question.
think there's more to
Okay.
picking berries, but you tell me.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, I didn't like picking berries prior to the
Oh,
beginning of August, I guess, or late July. I, wasn't that big of a fan of blackberries. I wasn't, for or against them. I just,
okay.
didn't choose to eat them very often. If I was forced to eat a berry, which, happens as an adult, raspberries are okay, and strawberries are all right, and stuff like that. But what it was is we take our dog for a walk twice a day. And for a while, John's been picking some blackberries in this patch that we walk by in a house that the people are kind of like snowbirds, or they're just rarely there. And so they have these huge blackberry bushes that just kind of go crazy. And so, I'd let him pick some berries and do his thing. And it's like, you want to pick some? And I'm like, no. And, and just has been adamant. And we've lived here for 9 years. And those bushes have been there for 9 years. Um, and so, yeah, so this, at some point, I'm like, okay, I'll help you pick some berries, but I'm not going to eat them. And there was just something in the foraging through, the little leaves and stuff, and getting the glove on, because they're very, very prickly. They're pretty mean. That was just so delightful, and that, when we brought them home and would wash them off, and then I'd eat them, they just tasted like the best berries ever. And so, I realized that it's a dopamine process, that it's, hunting through and then just finding a ripe bunch of berries there is, it's a dopamine hit. And so then
Mhm.
I pick those, and then I'm looking for my next hit,
Mhm.
and I love it. It's brought me so much joy. Yeah, I'm sad that berry season is
Uh,
almost at an end, because yeah, I surprised myself. I invited a friend over, and she, got to pick some too, and yeah, it's just a really cool dopamine hit. It's, one of the few times that I actually know what's happening. At first I was just like, this is so much fun. Why is this so much fun? I don't understand why I love this so much. And then I was listening to Dr. Huberman from the Huberman Lab podcast. If anybody, is feeling up to some real high level but understandable information from a Stanford professor, please check it out. I love Huberman Lab. But yeah, he talks about the serotonin and dopamine process, and what's happening there. And then, yeah, that's how I put it together. I'm like, oh, I'm getting a dopamine hit every time that I find these berries, and I pick them, and then, and then I bring them home, and they just taste better because it's
mhm.
something that I have done. So, like people who grow gardens, and get carrots and things like that, that it just, seems to taste better because it's something that you put effort into and stuff.
Bree wants to know how many binders you own. Bree, we've talked about binders before.
Yeah,
She owns a
yeah.
lot of them.
I do. I have a lot of binders, but surprisingly enough, I don't have my binders cataloged at this time. But you have given me, the idea that I probably should. So yeah, so we may have to, decide if I'm going to catalog them by Jonathan's binders and my binders separately, or household binders. Yeah, that I'm going to put some work into that, and I'll let you know at some point. But yeah, I easily, well, it depends on, are we talking binders that are filled, binders that are half filled, binders that are filled with binder materials to fill more binders? Yeah, there's a lot of directions we can go with that. But yeah, I have a fondness for office supplies in general. They make me feel secure. Um, and yeah, and that's just, one of the things about me. So.
Well, we are. I like your description of picking berries. Makes me want to go out and do that. We're down to our last minute now, so I don't really know if there's really time for this last question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. I don't think there's really time though. We'll go for it. Now that ICSA 2021 has been canceled, they're looking at
Mhm.
doing another online conference.
Mhm.
Do you think online conferences can be reimagined so that they're more interactive, or are we stuck with looking at a grid of people on a screen? Maybe I was
Yeah,
kind of depressed when I
that's
wrote that question. I don't know.
yeah, it sounds like it. No, I do think they can be reimagined and be much more interactive, and yeah, there's a lot of things we can do to make it a better experience for people, but it requires people to be interested in doing that, and willing to put in the time
Mhm.
necessary to do it. And so, yeah, so I don't know if that'll happen, in the next few years,
Yeah.
but yeah, I definitely think that they can. And also there's more technology that's coming along that I think will make it so that, we'll be able to sit with each other in a virtual reality
Mhm.
room and feel like we're, in a
Wow.
meeting,
That is
and
yep,
in
absolutely.
interacting with each other. And so we'll probably have more virtual conferences than in-person conferences
Gotcha.
at some point. So
Wow, amazing. Angela, you did a really great job answering those questions. Thank you very much for doing that. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody, for participating with your comments in the chat room. And it's just been a really good night. So I'm going to go ahead and say good night now. Thank you, everybody, once again. We'll be back again next Friday for another live stream. And until then, you all take care and be well. Bye bye.
good night.